Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to stay updated with our latest videos. People knew him for his blue eyes. People know him from his pictures. But Paul Newman was a whole different person at home. His daughter is now sharing the truth about what happened behind closed doors. The drinking that almost broke up their family, the guilt he felt after his son's overdose, and the shocking lie he told on his deathbed. Everything you thought you knew will change after reading this. He was born in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, on January 26, 1925. Traditions and cultures from all over the world were mixed in his family. His dad, Arthur Newman, was Jewish and the son of people who came from Hungary and Poland. Teresa, his mother, was from Slovakia. He had a successful sporting goods shop with his parents in Shaker Heights, a wealthy Cleveland suburb. Even though Paul grew up in a good home with plenty of money, he still had to deal with racism. Hatred of Jews was popular at the time, and most people in Shaker Heights were Christians. Paul was an athlete and a good student in high school, but he was turned down for participation in a fraternity because his father was Jewish. It was an event that stuck with him and probably affected how he thought about justice and equality later on. At the same time, he had a creative childhood. He played Robin Hood in a school play when he was only 7 years old. That small part made him feel something. After that, he joined the Cleveland Playhouse's kids' theater school and was in shows like St. George and the Dragon. He didn't think of acting as a job yet, but he liked doing it. After graduating from Shaker Heights High School in 1943, he went to Kenyon College to study economics, but World War II cut short his studies. That same year, just before he turned 18, he joined the U.S. Navy to become a pilot, but doctors found out he was colorblind during training. He was then put to work as a radioman and rear shooter for torpedo bombers because he could no longer fly. He was stationed in Hawaii in 1945, getting ready for war missions. His group was sent to the USS Bunker Hill, an aircraft carrier that fought in the Battle of Okinawa. But right before deployment, his pilot got an ear infection. This small health problem kept their team from going on the mission. A few days later, kamikaze pilots struck the Bunker Hill. Many soldiers from Paul's unit died. If he hadn't had that ear infection, he probably would have been one of them. He finished his service and got medals like the American Area Campaign Medal and the World War II Victory Medal. But what was most important was that he left the Navy with a new outlook on life. He had a new view of life after that near-death incident. He wasn't going to waste the second chance that was given to him. He went back to Kenyon College after the war. He lost interest in business. He joined the drama club at Kenyon and was in shows like The Front Page, Anne of the Thousand Days, and The Taming of the Shrew. In Charlie's Aunt, he played a man dressed as a woman who brought much-needed laughter to the school after a terrible fire. He also wrote and directed a satirical student musical that made fun of campus life. This indicated that he had a sharp sense of humor and a natural talent for telling stories. Even though he did poorly in school, theater gave him a purpose. Looking back, his dismissal from Ohio University wasn't the end of the road, it pushed him towards something better. His life took a different turn after he graduated in 1949. In 1950, his father died, leaving him in charge of the Cleveland store that sold sporting goods for the family. The store had been open since 1915 and was one of the biggest in the city, but Newman didn't love running it. He felt trapped in a life he didn't want for 18 months. Later, he admitted that he was running away from that life instead of enjoying it. He did something brave in 1951, he left Cleveland and went to the Yale School of Drama. He didn't think he had what it took to be an actor at first, so he planned to study directing. But after a year at Yale, he took another risk and moved to New York City to learn under Lee Strasberg at the famous Actors Studio. That's where he learned method acting skills that would shape his roles for the rest of his career. In 1953, he got his big break when he got a part in Picnic, a Broadway play written by William Inge. He wanted to play Hal Carter, the lead role, but director Joshua Logan didn't think he was right for it. Instead, director Joshua Logan cast Newman as a minor character, Alan Seymour. It wasn't the part he had hoped for, but Picnic was a big hit, runny for 4 years. People liked his performance, and reviewers praised how he gave the character depth. He was nominated for his first Academy Award for Best Actor, which showed that he was more than just a good-looking guy. The movie was a huge hit and was nominated for 6 Academy Awards. It didn't win any, but Newman became one of Hollywood's biggest stars. The choice to shoot in color also had an unexpected effect. It brought out his beautiful blue eyes, making them one of the things people talked about the most. After that, his looks became just as famous as his playing. He was at the top of his game by the early 1960s. He portrayed Eddie Felson in the television series The Hustler. The Hustler. Felson was a small-time pool hustler with big dreams. The movie was high fashion, scary, and full of moral problems. Newman gave the character both pride and weakness, making him one of the most famous anti-heroes in movie history. The movie was nominated for 9 Academy Awards, and Newman won 1. Then Hud came along in 1963. Newman played Hud Bannon in this Western drama. Bannon was a selfish rancher who was at odds with his father. Hud wasn't like other Western heroes. He was careless and had bad morals. This made him a new type of character for Hollywood. The movie got 3 Oscars and put Newman up for another Best Actor award. In 1967, he gave another wonderful performance in Cool Hand Luke. He played Luke Jackson, a prisoner who doesn't want to be broken by the system. His defiance made him a figure of resistance, and his performance in the movie made it a cultural landmark. A movie line became famous: "Poor communication is what we have here." The quote was from Strather Martin's character, but it would always be tied to Newman. He was nominated for another Academy Award, which added to his growing fame. People couldn't stop talking about his blue eyes no matter what. They were just as well known as his movies, but Newman never let his looks define him. He once said as a joke that his gravestone should say, "Here lies Paul Newman, who died a failure because his eyes turned brown." But he had already built a business that was much more than how he looked at that point. The two actors met in 1953 while they were both understudies in the Broadway show Picnic. He was married to Jackie Witt and had 3 kids at the time. Some of the famous people Woodward dated were Gore Vidal and Marlon Brando. They hit it off right away, but at first it was just a friendly relationship. Newman later admitted he was drawn to her right away. To this day, she was more conservative than he was. He found her even more interesting because of that difference. In 1957, they broke up but got back together to co-star in The Long, Hot Summer. The marriage of Newman was breaking up at that point. His friendship with Woodward got stronger, and soon they couldn't hide what they were feeling for each other. Newman married Woodward in Las Vegas in 1958, a year after their vacation in England. They decided to start a new chapter in their lives, our life together. Even though they were happy about their new marriage, Newman felt bad about how he handled his divorce. He later said he wasn't clear with his kids about it. Still, his love for Woodward was too strong. He said, "She gave birth to a sexual being inside him." They were very close for 50 years after that, and it changed their marriage. Even in Hollywood, being together for 50 years was no easy task. They loved each other very much, but their marriage had its ups and downs. Newman once said something famous about his love for Woodward: "I have steak at home, why should I go out for hamburger?" He meant to show his devotion, but it also hinted at the problems and pressures they had to deal with. One of those problems was his fight with son Scott died from a drug overdose in 1978. Overdose in 1978. The family was very upset about this loss. In the end, Melissa, their daughter, said that her parents worked hard to stay together even when things were tough. Newman and Woodward went to Connecticut to get away from the stress of Hollywood. They wanted their 3 girls to have a calmer life. He often said nice things about Woodward and said she kept him grounded. Even though they both had jobs, they always helped each other out. This balance became one of the best things about their relationship. Their work lives often ran into each other. They worked together on 16 movies, beginning with 1958's The Lynn Hot Summer. Newman portrays Gallagher, a man attempting to clear his name. He gave the part a quiet focus. He was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor for his role. Thereafter, the verdict came out in 1982. Newman played Frank Galvin, a lawyer who had lost everything and was looking for forgiveness. He takes on a case of medical malpractice and gets a chance to show what he can do for the first time in years. No matter how hard things got for Newman, they felt real. He showed Galvin's hopelessness, his drive, and his slow healing of his pride. The movie was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, and Newman won 1. Even though he didn't win, it was one of the best performances throughout his career. Newman had been nominated for 5 Oscars, but he had never won. He had been up 7 times but never won. The Academy gave him a special Oscar in 1986 for his life's work, almost as if they thought he'd never win. But the very next year, in 1986's The Color of Money, he finally did it. He played fast again. From The Hustler in 1961, Eddie Felson, Newman, made sure Eddie had changed since the last time he played the part 25 years ago. He was older and smarter now, but he still wanted one last chance to be great. He taught a young pool player, played by Tom Cruise, how to play. There was more to this story than just a mentorship. It was about pride, desire, and getting old in a world that never stops moving. In 1987, Newman won the Oscar for Best Acting. Not just for this part, but for everything he had done for movies. He finally got his due reward. As he aged, Newman never lost his magic. In 1994's Nobody's Fool, he played Sully Sullivan, a grumpy but likable handyman in a small town. Even though Sully had a lot of problems, Newman made him funny and friendly, which made him one of the most likable characters in his career. He was 69 years old, but he was still doing some of his best work. He was nominated for another Academy Award for the role. His last live-action part was in Road to Perdition, 2002. This time, he played John Rooney, an Irish crime boss who had to choose between family and duty. The movie was mostly about his connection with Tom Hanks's character as his surrogate son. Rooney wasn't a typical bad guy. He was a man who was pulled between love and duty. Newman played him with quiet power, giving every word a lot of weight. If he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor one last time, he would have been 77 years old. After more than 50 years of work, it was a proper end to a career. Paul Newman was a big star in Hollywood, but his life wasn't always easy. He fought self-doubt behind his success. Had a hard time being a father and was always drinking. Few people knew about this part of him until his autobiography, The Extraordinary Life of an Ordinary Man, came out. People who knew him well were shocked by what he had kept hidden for so long. Even though he was famous, Newman never thought he was rich. He believed his good looks had given him opportunities he didn't deserve. He said he was nervous and full of doubt, always afraid that people would see that he wasn't as good as they thought. In spite of being in movies like The Hustler, 1961, and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969, he still felt like he didn't fit. These fears had been ingrained in him since youth. His mother used him more like a prize than a son, and his alcoholic father hurt him so badly that they never fully healed. His second wife, Joanne Woodward, helped him feel better about himself. She saw something in him that he couldn't see in himself, and she asked him to be proud of his image as a sex icon. That didn't make him believe it, though. He was always wondering if people liked him because of his skills or because of age. Despite his good looks, he made it clear in his autobiography that he wanted to shatter the idealized image people had of him. Had made of him. He wanted everyone to see the real him. His problems weren't just his own. He felt like a bad father. He had 6 kids, but he admitted that he was often irritable, tardy, and not there for them. When his son Scott died of drug abuse at age 28, it hit him the hardest that he had failed. Newman felt terrible about Scott's problems. He thought about whether his success had made things harder for his son, Scott, and whether Scott had felt like he had to live up to an M700 horsepower. But the race was rough. The track became a slippery battlefield when it rained heavily, making it difficult for many teams to keep up, but Newman's team persevered. Team kept going. They finished 299 laps and came in second overall and first in their class. It was a wonderful accomplishment, especially for someone who started racing so late in life. His performance stunned the motorsport world, and he had proven himself on the biggest stage. Newman wasn't just a great driver, he also knew how to put together in 1983, he teamed up with Carl Hose to establish Newman Hose Racing, which went on to become one of the top IndyCar teams. Newman Hose Racing. It became one of the best IndyCar teams very quickly. Their first season was a big deal. Mario Andretti won the 1984 kart championship, which showed that the team was one of the best. They made more history in 1993 when they hired Nigel Mansell, who was the reigning Formula One winner. In the same year, Mansell won the IndyCar championship, which was something no other driver had ever done in their first season. Newman Haas Racing won 108 races and 8 championships over the course of almost 30 years. He never stopped playing, even when his racing career took off. He did the voice of Doc Hudson in Pixar's Cars in 2006, which was his last major movie part. The character, an old race car with a famous past, was a great fit. The 1951 Hudson Hornet that inspired Doc was a champion in the early days of NASCAR, and Newman's own racing history made the part a perfect fit for him. He loved the project not just for the racing connection but also for Pixar's storytelling. The movie was a huge hit, making $462 million around the world. Newman stopped acting in 2007, but his voice came back in Cars 3, 2017, thanks to old records. At that point, his health was getting worse. He was honest about getting older, saying, "You start to lose your memory. You start to feel less sure of yourself. The idea starts to slip away from you." But he never gave up what he loved. Paul Newman was more than just a movie star. He had both wins and losses, and he turned his problems into something bigger. Lung cancer took his life on September 26, 2008, when he was 83 years old. He died at home in Westport, Connecticut, with his wife Joanne Woodward holding him as he breathed his last. His name will always be linked to great movies like Cool Hand Luke and The Hustler. But he left behind more than just movies. Unlike many artists, he never tried to become famous. He put family and purpose ahead of fame. He was married to Joanne Woodward for 50 years, which is a rare Hollywood love story. The two of them raised 3 girls together: Melissa, Nell, and Claire. He had 3 kids with Jacqueline Witt from his first marriage. He went through some hard times in his life. In 1978, his son Scott died after taking too many drugs. He felt terrible about the loss and wondered if he could have done more. But instead of being sad, he did something about it. He started the Scott Newman Center, a group whose goal is to help others fight drug abuse. He didn't talk much about his pain, but what he did showed how much he cared. By 2007, Newman had stopped acting. He was sick, but he didn't want anyone to feel sorry for him. When reports started to spread that he was sick, he laughed them off by saying that he was only getting help for athletes' foot and hair loss. His spirit stayed strong even as his body got weaker. His children have told parts of who he really was. In his autobiography, one of his children, Melissa, wrote about how he had trouble with self-worth. His background shaped him in ways he didn't talk about much. His father was distant and strict. The amount of love his mother gave him made him feel uncomfortable. These early cuts hurt, but Newman was able to get better. Clea, one of his children, says that helping other people made him truly happy. She now works for the Serious Fun Children's Network, which is a worldwide group of camps for sick kids. When she goes to see her dad, she often feels his presence because she knows that his work still changes people's lives. What he did best was start the food company Newman's Own with author A.E.H. Hotchner in 1982. It all began with an easy Christmas gift. Newman made his own salad dressing and gave bottles to his friends. They loved them so much that he decided to sell them. He and Hutchner put up $20,000 to do so.